Welcome to the third video for East Kent Schools Together's creative collaboration, Our Shared Isolation. I'm Esther Miles, the artist in residence for East Kent Schools Together. Thank you to everyone who sent a photo last week. It's really great to see those, and it's wonderful to keep sharing these artistic explorations together. Here are a few of them. Do keep sending those in to me and I'll try and pop them in the video next week. This week I'll be taking a greater look at the two portraits I introduced last week, the rainbow portrait of Elizabeth I and self-portrait with Thorn Necklace and Hummingbird by Frida Kahlo. I hope, like me, you found making studies of the work really helpful so that you can form your own opinions about these pieces. We all read a painting a little bit differently depending on who we are and what influences us, so your opinions are just as valid as mine, especially as I'm not an art historian, I'm just an artist. I'm going to work chronologically today, so I'm going to begin with the rainbow portrait of Elizabeth I. This painting was probably painted in 1600 by the artist Isaac Oliver. There's a little bit of uncertainty about that, as artists didn't always sign their work in the same way they do now. First, some background. This piece was probably commissioned by Robert Cecil, Elizabeth's chief minister, and you can see it now in Hatfield House in Hertfordshire, and that was one of his houses. Although 1600 feels like way back in history, we actually refer to this period as the early modern period. And during this time, we see that monarchs, kings and queens, actually started to be far more aware of their public image and how they could portray that in portraiture. Queen Elizabeth I was very good at this, and a lot of people refer to her as a master of propaganda, meaning that she knew how to portray a very powerful and political message through her portraiture and through symbolism. It's actually unknown how many portraits were made of Elizabeth, but we do know that there were quite a lot and that they were very widely available. Even if you didn't have a portrait or a copy of a portrait in your home, you would have in your purse a miniature portrait of her on one of your coins. So essentially most people were carrying around some sort of image of Queen Elizabeth I. We know this painting as the rainbow portrait because you can see her holding a rainbow in her right hand. This is now sadly faded, but would have been painted in full colour. The painting is not enormous, it's about 1 metre high, but she dominates the canvas in all of her orangey gloriousness. Since it's called the rainbow portrait, let's start with the symbolism of the rainbow. We spoke a little bit last week about the symbolic rainbow in art, and all of that is very relevant here. It still carries that message of hope and peace. And if that message wasn't quite clear enough, the painter has actually very helpfully painted this Latin inscription, Non sine sol iris. That translates as no rainbow without the sun. What this inscription and the rainbow is telling us is that Elizabeth herself is the sun, and she's shining down on the people of England, bringing peace. This point is emphasised by the orange glow that she has around her, of course in her famous hair, but also in this lovely robe she's wearing. We know that a rainbow is caused by sunshine after the rain, and all of this is coming after a bit of a rainy patch in English history. It's important to know that in 1558, when Elizabeth began her reign, England was in quite a lot of religious turmoil. She had inherited the throne of Mary I, who was a stout Catholic, but Elizabeth herself was a proud Protestant after the legacy of her mother, Anne Boleyn. Elizabeth tried to settle these tensions with a Protestant Catholic settlement. There had been other stormy weather in England in the 16th century. 13 years earlier, the Queen had overseen a successful defeat of the Spanish Armada, so it was important to reassure the English citizens of continued peace as a result of her military success. To underline this point, you can see she's also wearing this little amulet of a gauntlet, which is actually a piece of armour and represents her military success. So now we know that Elizabeth is the very personification of the sun to England. But there are also lots of references to the moon in this painting. If we take a closer look at her crown, we can see a little crescent moon here. Now this is the symbol of Cynthia, the goddess of the moon. Pearls are also associated with Cynthia and the moon, and you can see that she is wearing them everywhere. I have made a study here and it really highlighted to me how many of these pearls are all over her. You can see them on her crown, in her hair, around these strange wings here, obviously on her neck and down her torso, and she's wearing pearl bracelets as well. Because of the way they're formed and because of their whiteness, a preoccupation of the Elizabethans, pearls are also associated with purity. You may have heard of Elizabeth referred to as the Virgin Queen because she never married, and these pearls are a reminder of that. You can tell that the painter really wanted to tell us this by the amount of attention he has paid to each and every one of them. Every single one of them is beautifully shaded with a little white highlight to catch your eye. You'll notice that another part of the Queen is really blinged up, and that's the snake here coiled up in the infinity figure. The snake here represents not evil, but wisdom and cunning. It's telling us that the Queen is clever. In its mouth, you can see this little heart. It says, although she is clever, she also rules with her heart. Before she sent off her troops to their Armada victory, she said probably her most famous speech. I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and a king of England too. So this one snake could be signalling three things to us: that she is clever, but that she rules with her heart, and she's very chaste because of all of those pearls. Now there is an elephant in the room, but actually somewhat in disguise. If you take a look at her cloak here, you can see all of these really, really creepy eyes and ears. Now these say two things to me. Firstly, that she is a protector, that she's looking out for her country. But secondly, and a little bit more threateningly, that she has eyes and ears everywhere. Elizabeth actually had a vast surveillance network. She had a load of watchers and spies, and this was necessary because her life was actually constantly under threat. Lots and lots of rebels wanted to dethrone her and replace her with Mary, Queen of Scots, who was a Catholic. And even the Pope put a target on her back when he declared that to kill her would not actually be a sin. Now, the final symbol I'm going to talk about is quite a contentious one. It's actually her face. The faces of monarchs often become icons because we see them so often on our coins, on our notes, and in the media. But her face in particular is symbolic because the painter has very deliberately not painted her accurately here. As I mentioned, this painting was painted probably in 1600, and by this point she's in her late 60s with only 3 more years until she dies. This image of her face is completely wrinkle-free. It's actually given remarkably little detail compared to the rest of the painting, and it is like she is wearing this kind of mask of youth. Her face is sort of glowing white, almost mimicking the pearls and representing purity. It carries the message that she's young, healthy, pure, and totally fit for rule. So to recap, the Queen is making a very political statement in this portrait, and it's almost certain that she would have been aware of that. In the rainbow portrait, she appears both as the sun and the moon, strong but caring, wise but innocent, feminine but with the might of a king. Amazing that one image can carry so many opposing messages through the very clever use of symbolism. Our other piece is this Frida Kahlo self-portrait. The piece itself is actually untitled, but we call it Self-Portrait with Thorn Necklace and Hummingbird. So we're fast forwarding a few centuries and a few continents and ending up in 1940 in Mexico when Frida Kahlo painted this piece. Frida Kahlo was a middle-class Mexican woman, the child of a German father and a Catholic Mexican mother. She received a very good education and is known to have been particularly clever. She surrounded herself with intelligent, creative people and was very politically engaged, and was also a keen collector of art. She particularly was interested in arte populaire, or Mexican folk art, and had an enormous collection of this, as well as other curiosities from around the world. Her struggles with physical pain have been well documented. She suffered poor health as a child and went on to be involved in a horrific tram and traffic accident when she was 18. The traffic incident actually left her bedridden for a very long time. And typical of Kahlo's resilience, she actually uses this time productively to teach herself to paint. And because she's isolated for long periods of time, like we are, she actually uses herself as the subject of some 55 paintings over her career. By 1940, when she finished this painting, she was a well-educated woman in her 30s, with some career success behind her. In her private life, she was experiencing a turbulent year. In 1939, Diego Rivera had divorced her, and she'd also entered another relationship with Nicholas Murray. But more importantly, by this point in her career, Kahlo had really mastered her particular style and painting technique. Let's take a look at this self-portrait and see if we can unpack some of the symbolism. This painting is not large. It's about 61 centimetres high, and Frida is positioned right in the centre of it with her eyes cast slightly down so she's not staring directly at us. Let's start with a necklace. This is quite a contrast to Queen Elizabeth's jewels. When we zoom in here, we can see that these nasty thorns are really digging into her neck and causing her to bleed. We do know that Frida Kahlo experienced a lot of physical pain in her life, and that would certainly be a way to read this. But we also know that she had a great collection of indigenous Mexican art. Something that made up a large proportion of her collection were these Mexican tin retablo paintings. She had loads of them. Retablo paintings are sacred or religious paintings. Frida was an atheist, so she didn't belong to a religion, but her mother was a strict Catholic and her education was very Catholic. She would have certainly been aware of sacred imagery. Have a look at this retablo from 19th century Mexico. We can see here that Jesus has been pierced by these thorns on his crown, causing him to bleed, a bit like Kahlo is here. Kahlo seems to be drawing some sort of connection. Other clues in this painting also support this arguably blasphemous idea. Often in her paintings, she paints herself in beautiful traditional Mexican clothing, but here you can see she's in this very simple, sort of martyr-like outfit. There are also signs of the resurrection, i.e. rising from the dead, like Jesus. Butterflies are metamorphic animals, which means they begin life as a caterpillar, go into their chrysalis and emerge as an adult butterfly. They are often signs of the resurrection, and we can see here that Kahlo is wearing them in her hair. Dragonflies are also metamorphic animals. You can see them above her head. Both butterflies and dragonflies are symbols of hope because of the idea of rebirth. Perhaps our artist is telling us that although she is in pain, there is still hope. Of course, there are other symbols in this painting. Let's have a look at her hummingbird. The hummingbird seems to be important not only because it's the pendant in the centre of her necklace, but also its shape and proportion mimic that of her iconic eyebrows. Hummingbirds are often symbols of love and of hope, but this particular hummingbird does not look so well. It's uncharacteristically black and lifeless. As I've mentioned, Kahlo had a great interest in Mexican indigenous art and in Aztec culture, and the hummingbird is actually the symbol of the war god Huitzilopochtli. It was said that Aztec warriors were reborn as hummingbirds if they died in battle. Another resurrection idea. We can see over Kahlo's left shoulder this rather menacing looking cat. You may have heard of cats as being omens of bad luck or even death because of their tradition of being associated with the occult and witches. I think this cat's looking quite aggressively right at us, and it seems to be posed to pounce. On her right shoulder, Kahlo has painted this rather more passive looking monkey. It does seem like an odd thing to paint, but actually Frida Kahlo had a pet monkey that was given to her by her husband Diego Rivera, who she was to remarry later that year. Her relationship with him was famously tumultuous. She even said, "There have been two great accidents in my life. One was the train and the other was Diego. Diego was by far the worst." Many have interpreted the monkey as a symbol of Rivera himself, idly picking at the thorn necklace and actually causing her more pain. Monkeys are also linked to the devil and to evil. To get to know it a bit better, I made a study, and what I did notice when I was making this painting was that actually so much care and attention has been given to the painting of it. Each hair is so beautifully put in, and it's kind of quite cutely tufted around the edges. Kahlo used a leafy backdrop on a lot of her paintings at around this time. In art history, we often see plants used as a symbol of fertility and of life. In this self-portrait and many others, Frida Kahlo creates a lush example of Mexican botanical life, but it also could be read as rather dense and claustrophobic. So in conclusion, we can see that self-portrait with Thorn Necklace and Hummingbird has the function of conveying several messages to us, the viewer. We can probably deduce from it that she was experiencing some kind of physical or emotional pain. We can guess that from the sinister imagery. But what I really love about this painting is that the hopeful symbols of butterflies, dragonflies, and of nature push back against that and give this very hopeful and resilient message. So now we understand a little bit more about how symbols can help us understand a portrait. I want you to start thinking about symbols in your portrait. You can use as many symbols as you like in your piece, but at least one of them must be about what connected you to the outside world or to other people during your periods in lockdown. This could be your sign of hope for the future. Your task for this week will be to create some studies of your symbolic objects. Don't worry if you haven't picked your symbol yet. You could go back to the Dr. Jodie Walsh session and have a look at your postcard. That might give you some ideas. As I mentioned, my symbol is going to be knitting because I've done a lot of it for my friends and family during lockdown. Dr. Jodie Walsh really got me thinking about my symbol of knitting and wondering why it helped me feel connected to people during lockdown. One of the reasons might be that I can't hold my parents' hands, but making them a pair of gloves is a really good second best. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to incorporate my symbol of knitting into my final piece, but I'm hoping that making some studies will clear that up a bit. Here I'm setting it up a bit like a still life, and I've had a go at putting it on a dark background. You could try the same. Have a play. Here's my first study in pen. There's quite a lot of detail here, I had to look really closely. And here's another pencil study of my hands holding the knitting needles. If you have quite a tricky thing to draw, sometimes taking a photo can help you get to grips with the shading. You could try editing the photo into black and white, that can help. What is really important is to look very closely at your object or your animal. Spend more time looking at your symbol rather than just looking down at your page as you draw. You'll be emailed a worksheet to remind you about this, and it's also available on the East Kent Schools Together website. Again, I'd really appreciate it if you send me some photos of your work, and I'll try and pop that in the video next week. If you could get those to me by Thursday, that would be great. For now, I'll leave you with your worksheet. Very good luck with that. Thank you so much for watching and taking part in the project. Bye.